if the evidence so far from the various coups that happened on the continent, particularly since the turn of the century, are anything to go by, the chances of achieving reinstatement of the deposed president back to power is extremely slim. All indications are that the time for achieving that has long gone. The only possibility that this may be achieved is through military means, but even that is far from certain for achieving the reinstatement of President Bazoum back to power, on account of the fact that President Bazoum is in the custody of the military junta that staged the coup. So any military intervention may end up risking the life of the president, and therefore it may not achieve its intended purpose of restoring President Bazoum as elected president back to power. The experience so far shows that there were a few instances in which a deposed president was reinstated back to power. For almost 99% of the cases, constitutional order is restored through an electoral process and after a transitional government of some kind have been negotiated between coup makers and regional actors, whether it is through the African Union or through the Economic Community of West African States. This is indicative of the fact that the chances and the time for securing the restoration of constitutional order in Niger through the reinstatement of President Bazoum back to power has lapsed. Yes, diplomacy still has a chance for securing a negotiated outcome between ECOWAS and the junta in Niger. This may happen in two ways. One way of this happening is the junta agreeing to the shortest time possible for a transitional process that would culminate in the convening of a national election that would facilitate the restoration of constitutional order in Niger. This basically follows largely the template that was applied in the most recent coups that happened on the continent, most notably those in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. This may not, however, satisfy the most basic needs and expectations of ECOWAS. And this most basic expectation of ECOWAS is to put an end to the cycle of coups that are happening in the region. The fear is that if this coup is allowed to stand, it would then encourage others to also engage or consider the staging of a coup in other parts of the region and beyond. So the only compromise position or the only negotiated position that is better than the first option is what may be considered to be the 2014 Burkina Faso model. After Blaise Compaoré was forced out of power, the military in Burkina Faso in 2014 took power. Subsequently, there was a negotiation between the junta and ECOWAS as well as the African Union. Thereby, the junta was forced to agree to handing over power to a civilian-led transitional process, which basically ended up forcing the military to go back to the barracks, while the transitional process was led by and steered by civilians. And this perhaps is a much better option and the most viable option for securing the basic expectation of ECOWAS. What it achieves is basically the following. It would force the junta to hand over power and remove itself from the transitional process. And second, it would therefore allow for a more reform-based transitional process that can facilitate more democratic electoral process in Niger. But most importantly, from the perspective of member states of ECOWAS who are concerned about the recurrence of coups, it would mean that it would disincentivize other armies from taking power, because if they are going to be forced and not allowed to be part of the transitional process, there is no benefit, there is no incentive for them to stage a coup. One of the problems with the recent coups that happened in Mali, that happened in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Sudan, is that the regional actors, ECOWAS as well as the African Union, made major concessions to their principle of zero tolerance to coups by allowing the perpetrators of the coup to preside over and be part of the transitional process, while the principle of zero tolerance requires that the military actually transfers full power to a transitional process along the lines of what happened in Burkina Faso in 2014.